And so basically, I moved to Chicago. It's a funny story. I moved to Chicago in 2003, and in an effort to meet, by that time I had like 16 years clean. And in an effort to meet more clean time, I started going to Region, and Chicagoland had adopted CBDM before I arrived, and hadn't written a policy for it. And so I was part of the process to write that policy. And, uh, and basically, we've created a very open process. Anyone can raise a topic for new business. You don't have to be an RCM. You don't have to be a trusted servant or an alternate. You can, if you have a concern, you can come to Region and raise a topic. Um, Anyone can join the conversation. 80% consensus, but few things ever need to come to a vote. Um, when votes arise, each RCM, and we have 15 areas, and trusted servants, except the facilitators, can vote. All voices get heard and considered. And so part of the first process is a straw poll. As I said, any member can make a topic of discussion. And so during new business, topic maker discusses their concern and answers questions. And in many service settings, this is very similar to open forum kind of thing. We incorporate open forum in our decision making. And sometimes when a topic is raised, a proposal emerges from that discussion. And when that happens, the facilitator takes a quick straw poll. And on the first straw poll, if there's no consensus, the decision is made, no need to continue discussion. And if there's no consensus, discussion continues. The facilitator listens very carefully to find possible compromises. If a new proposal emerges, the facilitator sees if there's a consensus around it and continue the discussion if there's not consensus. If complete consensus does not emerge, take a vote and see if there's any change or whatever. And if there is 80% support, then it does pass or fail, either way. If there is no consensus, there's several options. You can table the matter and have the relevant subcommittee consider it. You can assign an ad hoc committee to investigate it. Our policy gives facilitator the authority to do that. If the proposal involves policy, as many of them do, it usually goes to the policy committee anyway, or just the proposal dies. Whichever option is taken, the facilitator gets buy-in from the body. They'll say something like, there's really no consensus here, and I'm not hearing strong support or opposition. There's no proposal. Let's just move on. And that happens occasionally, every once in a while. And so the facilitator's role is very, very important. Manage the agenda, first of all, and make sure that all are able to speak or ask. And a good facilitator makes sure the quietest voices can talk. Be open-minded, unattached to any outcome. As opinionated as I am, that's kind of like a third step freedom for me. Frankly, I don't have to bog myself down in opinions. I can just say whatever you guys decide is fine and really not have one. Makes it easy. There are two important things here. You have to listen, 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 and listen, but listening isn't enough. You've got to hear, 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 and hear. And so we do vote on a few things. Budgets are supposed to be voted on in policy, but we never usually need to because there's consensus. Elections are voted on. Motions of no confidence are voted on. Turning now to the Midwest Zonal Forum, which the Chicagoland region is part of. The Zonal Forum is 100% consensus. Anyone can participate. Anyone can make topics or proposals. Anyone can vote on trusted servants, which are balloted if contested, consensus otherwise. And this is taken from our policy. I've sort of shortened it a bit. The way we have discussion is for each topic, facilitators determine best way to reach a solution. And what that means is anytime during the meeting, someone says, I want to raise a topic, it just goes on a flip chart. And often those topics are kind of repetitive or whatever. The facilitator sometimes groups them together or does whatever. And also we do, and I don't have this in here, we also do prioritize them. We do dot voting, before new business to see which are most important. The MZF brainstorms possible solutions. Facilitators, we have two, listen to pros and cons and seek areas of consensus or compromise. Facilitators adjust, compromise, and fine-tune so all members are satisfied. We repeat steps until consensus is reached. And we've also been doing it for a very long time. And when you have 100% consensus, there are really three options. You can agree, you can block it. Yes, one voice can block something, or stand aside, meaning that even though you don't agree to it, you're willing to stand aside and let it go. These are, by the way, terms of art within the CBDM world. We rarely have that problem with the MZF. And so one thing that we don't have to worry about are abstentions. Abstentions, the World Service Conference has been grappling with what's the difference between abstaining and not voting, and how does that affect the vote totals and this, that, and the other. In this 100% consensus, abstentions don't really mean anything. And block is basically a veto. If a region hates an idea, it can block. At a minimum, it delays the decision. And so what it's created is just an atmosphere that participants trust the process and the other participants. In a setting where every idea is heard and considered, people are usually fine to stand aside instead of block. It is very rare when unanimity cannot be found and proposals are blocked. It does happen, but very rare. This atmosphere takes some time to take hold. So it's a cumulative thing. And I believe at this time, I will turn it over to Dennis.
Thank you, Louis. This slide was borrowed from our last presentation with Mark B., recent WSC co-facilitator. As you can see, the WSC has been striving towards consensus-based decision-making for decades. It's been a long and often painful process, as those of us that have been there can attest to. So my experience with this, Mark had a more outlined description of the history from his experience and his research. I don't have that, so I will share my experience in coming in 2014. So when I came in for the first time in 2014, we had consensus-based discussion session, then a formal voting session. So we would go through every motion or proposal in discussion first, poll, discuss, argue, and then when we were done, we would move into formal business sessions, where we do it all over again, except this time with formal Robert's Rules of Order, or what I endearingly termed yellow card hell. Anyone that experienced 2014 and 2016 knows what yellow card hell is. At the conference, we would raise our cards with either the purple side to go in the queue or a yellow side to immediately be addressed with some point of order, and that was specific for Robert's Rules. With the yellow side often being misunderstood or misused to skip queue or trying to figure out what part of Robert's Rules fit what someone was trying to say or have done right then. Because when a yellow card was raised, the facilitator had to stop and ask, what is the nature of your yellow card? So yeah, we also spent hours, and this is not an exaggeration, arguing over whether something required simple majority or 2/3 and why, even when it already had over 2/3 support. We've spent more time arguing about or misusing the process, whether intentionally or not, than we did actually discussing what we were voting on. So more time was spent in the process and debating the process than was on the actual content of the business we were trying to conduct. In both 2014 and 2016, it took all of Monday until just past midnight and half or better of Tuesday's business to dispose of 14 to 16 motions each. And there's no real sense of accomplishment for having participated in those sessions. Just a sense of having done our duty and survived. Anyone that was there, I think that's kind of the shared sense we had. Then new business for both years was inevitably flooded with various RD's proposals to try to fix the conference. By the dozens. We had dozens and dozens of new business proposals, all related to how to fix the conference. Because no one wanted to experience that again. And there was work done between each conference to try to improve on the process, but there was always something missing. And it was during old business in 2016 that I realized that service bodies experience recovery and a step process the same as we do. And in 2016, I felt us hitting a bottom. And if anyone saw me in 2016 suddenly being surprisingly upbeat and optimistic about the conference on that Tuesday, that's what happened. It was that moment of surrender and realization that brought that on, that we were hitting a bottom, change was coming. There's going to be that willingness to change that comes between a first step and a second step. So new work was done on our processes, and coming into 2018, we came to believe that the conference could be restored to sanity, and we gave this new process a genuine try. The third step moment was when in the middle of discussion on one motion, I don't remember which one it was, you could feel the hesitation to fully trust this new process, where usually cards would go up to question what's going on. And there kind of was a question, but it was the answer was accepted. And you could feel the desire to argue the process a little bit, but then you could feel that change where we made a leap of faith and we embraced the process. And you really could feel the energy in the room change at that point. And having experienced going only through 14 to 16 motions in essentially 2 days of business in the previous two conferences, we moved through 25 motions and various proposals to amend in a single day and still had time left, essentially. I mean, we went over, but we didn't hit midnight. And when we came out of that, we didn't feel like we'd just survived. We felt like we'd all participated together in something productive and something spiritual. So there was definitely something different about that. And although I didn't directly participate in 2020, I observed that although the underlying process still seemed functional and spiritual, there were new challenges, and there wasn't quite the same trust in the process as we experienced in 2018. And so, as with everything, the process continues to evolve ever forward. So, as great as it felt to experience this process when we first used it in 2018, it is not some magical or mystical formula. Like all consensus-based decision-making processes, it is a buffet of options constructed in a way that helps us get through business effectively while both focusing on the minority voice and helping build the resulting decision together. The underlying strength of this process is the 80-20 rule that focuses on the minority voice being specifically called out. So with that, when you take that initial straw poll, if there's consensus, 2 from the minority are specifically asked if they would like to be heard, regardless of which direction. If it's the majority for, then 2 from those that are against. If it's a majority against, then 2 that are for it. But either way, the minority is called out like, would you like to be heard on this before we move forward? And then if there's not consensus, it just automatically goes to discussion. Even if it has passing threshold, if there's not consensus, it's open to discussion. And that is pertinent because in 2018, there was a motion, I think it was motion 15, to create an additional international zonal meeting that was in addition to the work group meeting that would be tied to that. And it started off with near consensus support, but as it hit discussion and some of the challenges were presented and some of the costs were presented, it lost support and then it ultimately failed. And that was through the discussion process. And had that been Robert's rules, it would have passed on the first vote because it had better than passing threshold. But as we built the decision together, we figured out that it wasn't what we wanted to do. It wouldn't have been in our best interest. So, Northeast Zonal Forum, we started off with loose CBDM. I came into the NEZF in 2012, and prior to that, we'd practiced CBDM loosely for many years. There's no set guidelines. We met twice a year, and our core underlying phrase was, can we live with it? That was the principle we lived by. The only formal process we had was 2/3 majority for decisions, and it was entirely up to each facilitator on how we practice CBDM. So you could have a very different experience from facilitator to facilitator. But we also had many discussions just falling off the table. So at meeting only every 6 months, we'd say, hey, we need to send this back to our regions and bring it back. And then we come back like, oh yeah, we forgot to talk about that. Or, oh yeah, we're not ready for that. And then after you sit on something for a couple of years, it's gone, it's done. In 2014, we started meeting virtually, and they were typically every couple of months, but they were informal. It was Skype and a few other different things we tried out, but it was just discussions. It was informal, no decisions. In 2017, we moved to virtual decision making, to where meetings were formally every 2 months. Every 2 months we met, and we did full decision making equal to face-to-face meetings. So, with more meetings, that meant more decisions. More decisions meant more time making decisions, and meant more decisions going back to the regions. And we ran into that loose CBDM process lacked the clarity and consistency, and often left members confused with what was up for decision and how. And then the WSC 2018 happened with that simple, straightforward, flexible, and adaptable process. And in April 2019, we formally adopted that CBDM process almost word for word from Guide to World Services from the WSC 2018, and then adapted it to fit our needs as a zone. So our practice of it isn't identical, but the underlying decision making is the same functional process. So it is the exact same consensus process as WSC 2018 with the 80-20 rule, 2/3 minimum for decision making, and when there's consensus, seek the minority voice. Even if there's only one opposition or one for whatever, even if the minority is one, make sure we seek that voice out. And discussion is always an option, even when there's enough to pass. And we do operate on the same voting: yes, no, abstain, present, not voting. Keeps it simple. Everyone understands what's going on with that. And the flexible process allows us to adapt and evolve. And unless decisions are time sensitive, there's always the option to postpone. It doesn't have to be decided right now. It doesn't have to be done right now. If there's a need for it to go back, then there's a need for it to go back. If there's a need for more research, there's a need for more research. It's fine. Simple tools of facilitation work well, like is there any objection to or taking straw polls? And we successfully adapted the same process to our trusted servant elections, and we essentially treat them as proposals to nominate. And then moving from motion-like proposals to focusing on the idea or goal first, because even the proposal forms and the way that we address proposals still had kind of a Robert's Rules feel of we were more concerned with specific details than the idea. So, simply, same as with WOC, proposal comes in, initial poll, is there consensus? If yes, get the 2 minority voices. If no, open discussion. If there's a strong voice in there, it's always useful to ask if someone that really has a strong feeling, do you feel like you've been heard in this? It is very important or very helpful. And then poll again. If there's no significant change, then if there's 2/3 or more support, see if there's a strong objection to calling it passed, or if we need more discussion. If there is anything else, you can continue discussion, poll again, appoint an ad hoc or work group, postpone decision to the next meeting, or call it failed. A lot of it is hearing the body, listening to where the body is at, getting a sense of the body. So some examples of how we've adapted the process is with our treasurer process in 2019. We had multiple proposals come in regarding creating a treasurer and bank account. And each proposal had a different approach to the common goals. So we actually took those proposals and reformatted them into a couple questions. Does the NAZF want a bank account? Yes or no? Does the NAZF want to create a new position for those responsibilities? Yes or no? So we took 3 or 4 proposals and actually used those 2 questions to answer them, rather than just directly treat it like Robert's Rules, where you have to go one thing at a time, and if this passes, then this just made this one more complicated. And what if we want ideas from 2 of them? What if we want to combine little pieces of all 3? We wouldn't be able to. So that worked very well. And then fellowship development in 2020, multiple proposals formed from our ad hoc FD. It was set up in the form of, if this passes, then do this. If this passes, then ask this. If this and instead of doing that, and they're all very, very specific. So instead of that, we reorganized to the goal first, approaches second. Does the NAZF formally want to adopt fellowship development? Yes or no? And then we were able to go back and send back to because the regions were in favor of, we wanted FD, but we weren't sure what we wanted that to look like. Even though you had these suggested ideas, you had these proposed guidelines, but we weren't sure if that's what we wanted. But we did know we wanted FD, so that passed. So we acknowledged the decision that we wanted FD, and then we let it go back to the regions for another couple months to decide if this is the way we want to accomplish having FD. So we were able to do that together pretty easily. And we used the same adapted CBDM process for each question, that 80-20, the process that has been outlined. We use that same process for how we answer questions. So, with that said, back to Lewis.
I'm Lewis, and I'm an addict again. And by the way, I'm reminded, back when I was there in the Central Maryland split, it was the ASR from Mars. Anyway, so essentially, consensus-based decision-making in tradition 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. Anyone with experience doing CBDM will tell you a decision reached by consensus feels a lot more in keeping with the spirit of tradition 2 than a decision formed by a simple majority. So